Hey all, and welcome back. I put this video together. It's a two-part video. If you want to check this out, this is designed for people who are new to Artrage Vitae. But if you've already kind of got some experience with it, jump to minute 6:34. That's the timestamp that will get you to the actual tutorial video where we painted a still life. But the first part is all for just you guys who are new to it. How do you create a new document? How do I change the size of my canvas? What does real color blending do? How do I manipulate and change and create my own custom brushes with the oil paint sliders? If you're new to all of that, watch the first 6 minutes. If you've got your handle on all that stuff, jump ahead. This video is put together for people who attended the Mobile Digital Art and Creativity Summit. I was an Artrage instructor for this Mobile Art Summit, and I had a blast. I had no idea that Artrage would have such an impact on these people, and that they would be so curious. There were so many questions about just how does it work, what can you do, that we barely got to the painting that I had designed in my lesson, and we just kind of played in the software. So that said, let's get into that. And for anyone that wanted to revisit what we covered, this is what we did that day for the first 6 minutes. I'm just going to show you what the default oil brush does. The default oil brush with a square head, default oil brush with a square head, and then adding some depth to it. Default oil brush with a square head, 0 thinners, loading, increase the depth. Just look at the range of brush stroke you can get here. Huge, three-dimensional, chunky impasto, down to that kind of thin, even coverage. And that's just dealing with the first few sliders in the oil brush. Amazing range. But here's something else. If you click down on the selected color, so not in the color wheel itself, but down in that lowest corner, the active color, if you click on that, you can bring up a menu that lets you turn on or put a check next to real color blending. And when you do that, real color blending happens, so that blue plus yellow turns into actual green, just like it should, just like you know it did ever since you were a little kid in elementary school. So this is very awesome. And this is great that this is now a feature in Artrage Vitae on mobile, something that you can also do in Artrage, version 6 on the desktop. So then you have some more sliders. You've got aspect, which is basically the thickness of the brush at angle. So like a flat brush is sort of like I guess is like a shovel, where if you get the broad stroke, you can get a pretty wide mark, but if you turn it on its edge, it turns into a sliver of a mark. And then you have those sorts of abilities with Artrage to mold and manipulate brushes individually. Here though, we're working with the palette knife and just kind of accentuating the blending, that real color blending. You can just kind of smash any of those oil paints together, and they're liquid and they're fluid and they blend on the canvas just like real oils. You can change the size of your brush by clicking on the percentage with your finger, with a stylus. You can use the iPad to write in the size of the brush, all kinds of things. So here, just showing more of the cool color blending. There's settings within the palette knife that let you do a lot. You can set it to load and paint with it, meaning that you're like grabbing paint with the palette knife, and actually here we are just like injecting paint onto the canvas using the palette knife like a brush. That's very cool because you get more brushstroke variety with that. You can also just use a bunch of different presets with the palette knife as well, and it's just it's very versatile. So Artrage, as you can see here, has got this brilliant color mixing engine, this brilliant three-dimensional paint engine, so that it feels like you're working with a real three-dimensional material, which is one of the great virtues of oil paint. If you've ever painted with oils, it feels like it's kind of like at this oily, toothpastey kind of thicky, chunky. It's like nothing else. It's so rich. And Artrage lets you paint with all of that richness. And you can see here, even painting with the palette knife, the paint is interacting with the texture of the canvas. That's having a real impact on the texture of the mark. And then you can have that paint with the palette knife loaded or set it to no loading, so it's just a blender. And you have all of that control in a way that feels like real wet media painting, which is really what sets Artrage apart from anything else on mobile and almost everything else on desktop as well. So I'm a big fan, and you have layers and blend modes and all of the things that you would expect to have in any software package. Here again, painting on the iPad, here painting with Apple Pencil, and here painting with Artrage Vitae, the newest version of Artrage. It's kind of like the most pro version. And at the time of recording, there was a sale on the software, so it was like amazingly cheap. But even at the standard rate, it's only like $5 or $6. Like it's awesome. You'll get your money's worth guaranteed. I, as an artist who has used Artrage for almost a decade, I'm always happy to see new things coming out, always happy to see improvements, and especially on mobile where there's just so much movement right now. So here's the tube tool. It's just basically like a giant paint tube, and it just squeezes big chunks of paint out, big sinuous lines of paint out, and you can then use the palette knife and knock it down. And what's cool about that is it's like instant sunset or instant background or instant underpainting, and you can do some really cool things. It's got real texture, so the chunk of the paint, the three-dimensional paint, is interacting with the canvas. It's that real color blending is turning red and yellow into orange in a natural way. So all very, very cool stuff, and it feels different than a lot of mobile apps. I mean, for example, Procreate is awesome, but it just doesn't feel like a wet media. It feels like a digital media, and it's cool, and it's freaking great at being that. But if you want paint that feels like real paint that you're used to using in real life, try it out. It's a blast. So that said, we looked a little bit at how to create a canvas. We looked a little bit at how to paint with some of the tools and manipulate some settings. Now we've imported using the references button. So the references tool is, or a feature or button is down at the very bottom. It looks like a Post-it note with a thumbtack in it. You click on that, click on the plus sign. You'll have like an ability to add a reference from your photo library. And once you've got it in there, you can actually, if you want to, you can take your Apple Pencil or your stylus, and you can just long press on any color in that reference picture, and it'll immediately turn the tool into the color picker. So whether you've got a paintbrush or a palette knife, whatever, it'll turn it into a color picker and grab that color, and you can come straight over to your canvas and start painting. Why this is really helpful is, you can get perfectly exact values from your photo reference, but that's maybe not the end game. The end game is you want to be able to see and mix your own colors. But for a beginning artist, it's perfect because you can focus on drawing, you can focus on your tool settings, you can focus on your brushwork, and you don't have to worry about color mixing as well. So it's one way to get the color. The other is to simply use the accessible color wheel in the corner. You can easily grab the colors you need from there as well, because you have first you pick from the rainbow of colors, then you pick your saturation and your lightness or your darkness. So very, very cool, very easy to work either way. And what you'll see right away is just like that real color blending and the paintbrush settings that I'm using that you saw earlier, I'm able to get a really potent, a painting with a lot of presence. When I first saw Monet's Starry Night in the MoMA in New York City, I was struck. I was dumbfounded because I always thought Van Gogh. I was like, oh, everybody knows Van Gogh. Like, there's Van Gogh coffee mugs, there's Van Gogh like aprons, there's Van Gogh doormats. I was kind of like, whatever, But when you see Van Gogh, that was my little kid. I was just a kid and I didn't know any better. And when I went to the actual museums and saw Van Gogh, then I got it. His paintings have so much presence. You can feel his hand in each one of the brush strokes, and you feel the brush pressing into the media and it creating this actual physical texture on the canvas. And I'm telling you that Artrage is one of the very few pieces of software that gives any semblance of that in digital. I love using Procreate as a sketchbook, and I love using it for illustration or whatever, but I don't like using it as a painter. As a painter, I want something that feels like paint, and Artrage feels like paint. And you can see here that I'm building a painting just like I would on canvas, just like I would on my gessoed hardboard, just like I would on linen or whatever, right? Whatever I'm painting on. And you can, as you create your canvas initially, you can change the settings and you can give it more texture or different texture. And those textures and the scale and density of that will impact every single brushstroke. And you can then get into the settings of the oil brush, and you can make it feel like dry brush, or real bristly, stumpy, hard bristles, or real scratchy. Or you can make it feel very fluid and loose and thick. And you can do all kinds of cool things with the different settings that give you the ability to paint like you like to paint. Some of us like to have a lot of detail, or maybe the ability to go in and do a lot of refined painting. Others of us just want to sort of throw the paint from across the room and let it sort of smash together on the canvas and let things be messy. And Artrage really lets it feel like paint, lets it feel like that. And it rewards you for that, for crashing the paint into the paint. It rewards you for experimenting with color blending. It rewards you for taking risks, just like real painting should. Is there those moments like, if we could quote that icon Bob Ross, where he's like, a happy little accident or whatever. The cool thing with digital is there's no such thing as an accident, because even if you don't like something, you can just press Control Z, and in Artrage you just hit the little back arrow that's down on the bottom, right? And so it's up to you, but like, I just wanted to really share this moment with y'all, because there were plenty of people that got to embrace Artrage for the first time on mobile, painting on their iPads, painting with Artrage Vitae. And so I wanted to go through that with them. I wanted to show them, a little bit about real color blending, a little bit about settings, a little bit about how the different brush strokes work. And even just with a little dabbling, without getting too refined, you could get some amazing results and some really different brush work. That said, I also wanted to point out my process, because a lot of artists don't really know their process. And every time they start a painting, it's sort of just like jumping into the abyss. So I wanted to reinforce this concept, this 3 steps. First, start with your line. It's just a structural mapping of where the different shapes will go, how much space between the oranges, how big and long are the shadows, how curved are the edges, whatever. Just basic line, keep it simple. And I often will push that and say, let your line work, all the linear elements, be more angular, like vertical, horizontal, diagonal, just simple, simple, simple. And then the second step is you've got a white canvas, so go after your darks first, establish the dark values in those dark shapes that you've mapped out. And once you cover the canvas with all of those dark values, then you move to your mid-tone values and move to your light values. This is not only practical, but it's essential, because what you're trying to establish in a painting is where the light's coming from. In observational painting, you're trying to show light direction, the value range, and the color temperatures, and you do that quickly by getting your darks on the page right away. So we have line and we have value, and once the whole canvas is blocked in and you have no more white space or no more kind of like background color obnoxiously just kind of waiting for you to address it, then you can deal with edge. So that is, where there are soft edges, make them soft. Where there are hard edges, make them hard. And then you can kind of organize your painting process in this way, so that you always know, start with line, then get into value, make sure you get your whole value range established right away, and then lastly, deal with edge and make sure your edges are working and there's not distracting elements or whatever. And then I also, as part of the part 3, I like to play with different brushes so that my canvas doesn't feel redundant. Sometimes you'll see a painting where there's too much sameness from edge to edge, top to bottom. It's like, oh, they must have painted with the same number 4 brush, the whole canvas, top to bottom. Well, in this case, once you get the canvas covered, then you can be intentional about getting some different tools in there, different brush settings, mix it up a little bit, look where you can add some variation to the repetition. And even maybe finding a place to use the pen tool for some of the highlighting or whatever, and literally draw on top of your painting. It's okay. You can experiment, mix tools together that you wouldn't normally mix. And with that, guys, I just wanted to say thank you. Especially thank you to everyone at the Mobile Art Summit. Thank you for the invitations. I hope you are having fun with Artrage. This video is for you and for anyone else that's interested in mobile art using a really brilliant natural media tool called Artrage. And here's a little example of how to export your files. So thank you guys so much and have a wonderful night. Best wishes. Happy painting.